Hello, I'm Stefan. This is True Stories in a Composer's Life. In this episode, I want to tell you about possibly the oddest job that I've had in my career, plus why failing to meet your client expectations can actually be good for you. If you're also a freelancer in the music business, or if you do it as a sidekick or a serious hobby, you know you have to wear an awful lot of hats. We're talking writing, arranging, performing, recording, engineering, producing, mixing, mastering, maybe publishing, distributing. You do your graphic design, videos, websites, promote yourself, social media. It boggles the mind that doing all of that is basically the new normal for most of us. However, there was one job I had that was still music, sort of, but didn't fit into any of these categories, and that was working with ringtones. That is an incredibly small niche, but believe it or not, it gets even nichier than that. When I first started in ringtones, I was working for Siemens, a big industrial conglomerate. I mean, they build trains and windmills and medical equipment and phones. Up until about the mid-2000s, the only thing the ringtone generator in their phones could do was beep. I have one right here. I did all the beeps for this. Yes, it could do melodic beeps and even some limited polyphonic, like 2 and 3 voice beeps. But that's still beeps, right? So Siemens decided it was time to up their game, and they invited me along with 3 of their engineers to a workshop in the south of France. We were in this incredibly luxurious corporate office overlooking the French Riviera. It was a spectacular sight and a beautiful spring. We even got to do some sightseeing. The film fest in Cannes was happening. They were setting up the track for the Formula One race in Monaco. Truly one of the nicest business trips I've ever been on. Anyway, during this workshop, I met people from this other company. Now, I cannot tell you their name because I ended up working with them and I signed an NDA. I wouldn't tell anybody. Suffice it to say, that company is a global leader in phone guts. Their goal was to create a new ringtone player that would be better than anything else in its class, but could still be a low-cost device. My job on this team was to consult with them, help design this little synthesizer, make sure it sounded good. I asked for a ton of features that I knew would make the sound better, but I also had to let go of a lot so it wouldn't get too expensive. I designed all the sounds it could do, the presets, and of course I came up with a bunch of demos so they could monitor the progress. Development took about a year, and when it was all said and done, it got sold to all these different corporations, and it ended up in hundreds of millions of devices around the world. In fact, if you have a cordless phone at home or in your office, there's a pretty good chance that you're listening to a little bit of my work every time your phone rings. I don't know how many freelancers get to work on an ultra nichist project like that. I wouldn't be surprised if I'm the only one. But it was such a nice change to work with this small but incredibly dedicated team, all working towards the same goal. Truly a fantastic opportunity. But you know what? That wasn't even the end of it. This chip came with full documentation, of course, so these corporate clients with their engineers could certainly implement their own ringtones. But some came back to the company for support, and they passed them on to me. So pretty soon I ended up creating a ton of ringtones for all these different corporations. Now you might say, well, coming up with a ringtone isn't exactly rocket science, right? Which is true, but that's only part of the story. The more challenging part is tuning the ringtones. What is that? 2 things actually. First, if you were to throw a standard MIDI file at this thing, which you could do, there was a translation tool for this, often that would not be very successful. To get the best sound, you had to swap out presets for the better sounding ones, and to do that, you had to know where they are. Well, I knew because I designed them all, right? And also, number 2, think of your latest track. Maybe you have a new song where you recorded drums, bass, vocals, piano, whatever. At some point, though, you're done, you're mixing. And as you know, the same piece of music sounds completely different whether you listen to it on your studio monitors, your earbuds, your cell phone, or your car stereo. The art of mixing is to make sure the music sounds as good as possible across all these different devices. Tuning a ringtone is kind of like that, except we're only interested in how it sounds on one particular device, because you see the unique shape and design of these things, the type of speaker, where the components are located, how much air is in there. All of this acts as a filter and shapes the sound. So typically they would send me a prototype, and I was not allowed to show these things to anybody, of course, because they hadn't been out yet, with wires hanging out. So I could hook this up to my developer tool and then preview exactly how a melody would sound on that particular phone. So yes, sometimes they asked me to come up with new melodies, but oftentimes they already had a whole bunch, and all they asked me to do was the tuning. So this kept me busy for a few years, but one day something odd happened. The team lead of this group that I was working with, let's just call him Pete. So Pete called me and said, "Stefan, are you available to do a workshop for one of our clients in Hong Kong? They want to learn how to do their own ringtones." And I said, "It sounds like you're asking me to do a workshop on how to put me out of business." And he laughed and said, no, I mean, nobody knows this platform as well as you do. I don't see how you could possibly teach them everything you know in a matter of a 2-hour workshop, so I would not be so worried about that. I was a little worried about that, but of course you always want to keep your client happy, right? So I agreed. And Pete, his chief engineer, and I met at the airport and we took off. Why didn't they just send me? Because we actually made a stop on the way in Japan and we visited Panasonic, which is also one of their clients. In fact, I've worked on a lot of melodies for Panasonic too, but I didn't have anything to do during this stop except, be impressed by Panasonic, which is really an incredible company. I'm very glad actually I got to see it. But it was Pete who was giving a presentation on all the latest development of this platform, which by the way could do a whole lot more than just ringtones. They kept updating, maintaining it, and he was so passionate telling them about all the latest stuff. But at the end of his presentation, there wasn't a round of applause. These engineers were incredibly focused. They were asking all the right questions. They were literally grilling him. And suddenly I got the willies about my upcoming workshop because I didn't know this could get so tough. So the next day we're in Hong Kong. I'm setting up for my presentation. You would know this company, also a big global player, but again, I don't want to mention their name. I had prepared some files on my laptop. I also brought my little travel MIDI keyboard to do some demonstrations. That thing right there, actually, I still have it. Now, I was talking to a small group, no more than 5 or 6 people, and they looked like identical twins. They had the same company shirt, company tie, company clipboard, 2 spare company pens in the shirt pockets, except this one guy. He was dressed casually, he had long hair, and I thought, this dude looks like an artist. Well, he was too. Turns out he was a musician. As he later told me, he played in bands, and actually he wouldn't let me leave until after he showed me his heavy metal guitar. Presumably he was the designated music guy of this group. So I started on a light note. I just recorded some MIDI data and showed them how you can change the sound, transpose, stuff like that. But of course it got a lot more technical very soon, and I had the feeling I was losing these people. So I said, if anything isn't clear, please interrupt me so I can explain. From the handful of questions that I got at all, it was obvious that this group only had a vague idea of what I was even talking about. Now, this was a 2-hour workshop. We took a break in the middle. When we came back, there were twice as many people in the room. And even as I continued, more and more people kept trickling in, and I thought that was odd. Maybe they were tied up with other meetings, but maybe next-level senior engineers were being called in. All I know is that by the end of my presentation, the room was packed. There were people standing in the back. So after I was finished, lots of business cards were handed out, and of course I still listened to that guy and his heavy metal axe. Out of the blue, he started shredding in front of me without an amp even. He must have been so happy he finally found someone to talk to about music. Anyway, the next day we're back on the plane, and I said to Pete, I was really worried about this after your session with Panasonic. These guys were giving you a hard time. And he said, no, not really a hard time, but hey, Panasonic engineers, These are some of the best people in the industry. Nothing like the bunch that you talked to, I suppose. And I said, well, definitely. Somehow I don't think they got anything out of my presentation, I'm sorry to say. And he goes, well, this is what I told you before we started. You wouldn't have anything to worry about, right? In fact, you may wonder why we even brought you. And I said, well, did I miss anything? Why did you bring me? And he leans over and says, Stefan, this trip, the three of us, the airfares, the hotels, the meals, your fee, obviously, all of that costs our company a lot of money. Why do we do this? Because that company is a very good customer. They buy millions and millions of chips. They asked me for this workshop. Am I going to say, no, we don't do this? Stop. It's not going to help you anyway. Of course not. We just do it. So a few days later, we're back home. I called Pete about something, and at the end he said, by the way, I just got feedback from Hong Kong about your workshop. They said the workshop was not successful. We still don't know how to do ringtones. So the workshop wasn't successful, which means I failed to meet the client expectations, but as such, I got to keep my job. That's all for today. Don't forget to subscribe so you don't miss the next episode of True Stories. Thanks for watching.